And we live, people. We live. What's up? What's up? What's up, y'all? Okay. I'm gonna get situated here with my camera. Okay, let's get my jug out the way. Y'all don't need to see this. This was my manifestation, visualization plate. Keep that between me and the universe. Oh, this is some homework I got to do, y'all. But check out my baby boy. Cutie pie. What's going on, y'all? I'm going live every Tuesday, okay? This is Soul Talk Tuesday. Where the soul meets the talk. Oh, just checking for my dogs, y'all. Just checking for my dogs. Yo, so what's up, y'all? Empress here, Dr. Barrows, or Maritza. All of us are in the building today. All parts of me, all sides of me coming out, coming through. I'm here today to talk about fear. You know, we're on assignment on this channel. We're schooling life. Okay. When we get here, we're learning in all kinds of ways from all different types of mediums, right? I've got my doctorate in education with a specialization in organizational leadership and a specialization in equity and inclusion. Um, and that's one area of expertise. But then I'm constantly learning from reading books, obviously, a lot of learning going on YouTube University, especially tapping into the spiritual history learnings that tend to be hidden and are pretty dry when reading a book. But listening while doing other things like, my domestic chores and driving, instead of listening to some music, we can, do some learning. But anyways, I'm here to talk about fear and how fear was the first parent that I knew, right? And every week I want to come in and talk to y'all about mindset, topics around mindset, topics involving your whole self. We're going to be definitely moving in through different topics, but it's always going to be connected to us and who we are, who we need to be when we're on assignment. And being on assignment is all about being in alignment. And for me, I'm in this path of not of becoming anymore, not of chasing and searching, trying to define who I am, but really slowing down, pausing, looking back, and remembering who I am, who I've always been, and making sure that I can align my vibrations and my energy to meet my true highest self, right? So, how do you get there? You don't just wake up one day and poof, it's just there. It's actually been a continuous journey that I've been on, self help, self development. I've always actually been more into self help books than I've been into like nonfiction reading. Um, so I've just always been wanting to understand more, um, get a sense of like what is really happening inside of me and all these things that you're supposed to automatically know and do as a human being. Um, I missed I missed those messages, those calls along the way, right? So it's been in my spirit to want to like to think back to what it was and how did I make that shift. So hopefully I can help others younger than me, the who really are the future, like seriously the future, to make sure that this future shapes up to be a lot better than the one I grew up in. Let's be honest, right? So I just want to take a pause. Um, and see if we can take a breath together before we really dive into this chat. We'll see how long it takes. But deep breathing is a great way to connect with your body, to slow down the noise and really center yourself in where you're at and where you're hoping to be, and just being present most importantly. So let's take a breath, y'all. Um, that was just 5 deep breaths in. I held for 5 breaths and then released 5 breaths just to really slow down the mind and calm my spirit. I do have my notes here, y'all, because I didn't come here just to, randomly talk. I wanted to make sure I'm giving y'all some meaningful things and allowing us to dig deep in certain pockets, give you some food for thought, or affirm where you are in your journey right now, because it's not many people who you might find around you who is very diligent or disciplined around their learning, self-care, self-development, self um, help, I guess. But there are a number of people doing it, trust me, in their solitude and in their quiet time. And this is where you've got to start getting comfortable with being with yourself. I know for me, growing up in a big family, that was something to really intentionally get used to, is that time of solitude and being alone and not feeling lonely because of it. So today we're going to be talking about fear being my first parent, and I'm not here to blame anyone. I'm just here to dig a little deeper and bring truth into light, right? I was raised with very loving parents, of course. But fear, I would say, reflecting back, was definitely my first love language, right? Or first language of love, because fear was a big form of um, like a tool, I guess, that especially my father used to instill respect in the household, right? So respect came with fear. Control was a sign of care, because everything was controlled, not necessarily what you thought, but maybe what you expressed. Um, where you go, when you come, but that was all in form of care, right? And silence. Silence was my safety. Um, when you're silenced, you don't have a lot of risk, right? But that was love in the only language that my parents knew, that was passed down to them by survival, right? So this is where, through life experience, through hindsight, you start to see, you start to overstand a thing. And what I can overstand is that fear was passed down due to survival, right? From my parents' upbringing and lived experience. So, fear based parenting is a trauma response rooted in intergenerational oppression. And critical race theory, I'm going to bring in theory into these talks as well, y'all, because scholarship and being able to name a thing is super helpful in the healing process. And I know that's been transformative for me, even in just learning how to name my feelings. But then when you start to be able to name behaviors as not just something that I've experienced, but it's honestly scientifical, and has been scholarly, I'm sorry, proven through scholarship, it's hard to deny it, right? So critical race theory helps us understand how systemic and racialized fear shows up in family dynamics. So it's not like this is just this particular family, my family, or this is just the Cape Verdean families or Black families or island families, right? This is systemic. and it obviously influences and impacts the family dynamics. Intersectionality is another theory that in this talk about fear as my first parent, um, it reminds us that race, gender, and class, yeah, they all complicate how love and discipline is expressed. And so they automatically my mind goes to thinking about the gender differences culturally, in regards to how fear was enacted and how we were raised. Um, as far as race, it would be more of colorism, light skin versus dark skin, and the treatments and how that impacts and influences like the dynamics of fear in our upbringing. It's all relevant. Um, I remember what it looked like to act in fear. Then I didn't realize that I was acting solely in fear until I was obviously awakened later on in years. Jack, I had to pause, y'all, because I hear my dog chewing on something. So let's remember the times that I let fear actually lead my decisions versus love or vision, right? I'll go back to when I started searching for colleges. Going to college was my escape route. It was my opportunity to get out of the control that my father, my parents had over me and my life and my future. And I chose the college I went to, not out of fear. I'm sorry, not out of vision, but out of fear, right? I didn't think about what did I really want to do in life, right? I just thought about what's the major that can get me a job and they have at the school. Granted, I always wanted to be a teacher since very young, 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 young. But that's because I'm an educator at heart, right? I'm a teacher of life. I'm a teacher in the classroom, out of the classroom. Education has always had to be a part of me. It just wasn't in this traditional path that you might think that I thought by going to college to study education. And I failed my MTELs. I didn't get into the education program and pivoted to psychology. Um, but if I would have thought about my vision in life, honestly, y'all, I probably should have studied business. Um, Definitely still psychology in my pathway because I think that as well was rooted in my sort of path and destiny. But journalism would have been something else that I would have explored. Also, I might have actually thought about not going to college and go to cosmetology school because I love doing hair, makeup, fashion, all of that. So they were pathways that I could have explored, but I was just so focused on the fear of being at home and having that time to explore that. I left to go to college, right? The other time is when I came back from college to go live under the roof of my parents whom had such control over me, and being away from them for those 5 years that I was in college, I did not want to go back under the rule and the thumb of control. So I made another decision out of fear. I moved out on my own without the necessity to do so. Um, and I took on college loans that I didn't need to take, in fact, because I had tuition reimbursement, right? And this is where my vulnerability comes out. But yeah, I ended up working at the institution that I was studying. And so I had free tuition. But I said, you know what? This additional financial aid that I'm being offered can help pay my living costs so that I can have my peace of mind and my sanity to go ahead and finish my master's degree. Today, still to this day, I'm sort of like halfway there, regretting and then okay with that decision because obviously I didn't have to take on that extra cost, but at the same time, I wonder like, listen, my peace and sanity at that time was priceless. So for whatever it is, the fact is that I left the fear of not having my own, I guess, freedom and liberation to the level that I wanted to keep me from um, making a more clear decision at that time. So I made moves, not necessarily at that time to expand, but actually to escape, right? And that had its consequences. I'm still sitting on those consequences when it comes to financial aid. Um, I should say financial loans because financial aid, okay, we're not going to harp on that. But listen, um I hit a wall, right? We all come to a point where we shift, and there's moments where we know like this is it. I'm done with this. And that was it for me. I had a time when I knew I needed to do something because I didn't want to just continue surviving, right? So I hit a wall. I burnt out. I was burnt out because, of course, you're working, you're trying to become an entrepreneur. But I was moving on this check to check status ever since getting out of college, right? Because you get out with those loans as well. And I had no spiritual, emotional safety net. I honestly, in my early times post college, I couldn't even name a particular feeling sometimes that I had, right? So that quest led me to just being still, right? It was the first place that I started hearing my truth again, started hearing my voice, deciphering between the voice who's speaking and the voice who's listening, right? And that of which is actually mine, organically mine. Um, and there's a theory I want to share with y'all. Polyvagal polyvagal theory. It explains how we shift from fight and flight, from like survival mode to rest, um, and restoration or healing mode, right? So from survival to healing. And this shift allows space for reflection, creativity, and trust to emerge. And honestly, that has been my greatest saving grace because it's given me the power to believe in something bigger and beyond me or any one who I know, or it's given me life even, right? To know that yes, I have obviously parents who were my vessels, my womb to transport me here to this world. But I am also a child of God, and I have a plan and a purpose. Well, God has the plan. I have to find the purpose. And discovering that it wasn't a need for me to become, like the more I learn, the more I study, the more I can become, and the more titles I can have and permissions can be granted. No, it was actually about learning to remember. Remember why I'm here, my mission and purpose for my time here, for me remembering my birthright of abundance and worthiness, for me to remember the genius that lies within me, to remember the power that I have over myself, my life, my emotions, right? My happiness, my joy. Um, really recognizing that trauma is not the only thing that we've inherited. It's been the main, a lot of the focus, and we gonna get stuck in this cycle of trauma repetition. Um, even our coping mechanisms, right, that were supposed to protect us, we inherited, but now we're in a time because when you recognize like our parents, they raised us out of fear because they had to. In their time, it was about surviving, making sure your children can just survive, your child doesn't get um, harmed or killed, or your child doesn't get sold or stolen or taken to a different place. just for your kid to be able to make it past the age of 25. It's been about survival for our parents. Okay, when your child is out after dark, there's no guarantee in some eras that they would return home safely. So when you recognize that we have been raised out of fear and not love, it doesn't mean that we weren't loved, because we were very much loved. We are loved, but the fear is what led our parents and what taught us, right? How to be, to feel, to sense. And so now it's a time for us to remember that in one time that was not the case. And moving forward, that is no longer the case, right? Now we are preparing our children to thrive. The challenge is actually getting those foundational, you know, traditional lessons and values put into place that you know will anchor your children in the hardest of times, so that they can actually thrive. They can actually start discovering their gifts and their purpose and living out loud. But first, we've got to let go of that trauma. We have to forgive our parents and our caregivers, right? Because they did what they had to do and what they knew best. But now it's up to us to unlearn, right? To reverse, to remember, to shift our souls so that we can thrive and not survive. No longer only survive, okay? And once we're thriving, how do we help the next, one next to us, far from us, or just the next generation to thrive themselves? So I ask myself, I ask you, what happens when you stop letting fear make your decisions? You soar, you thrive, you envision, you know. Okay, there's no doubt, uncertainty left. So let me offer you this. If fear is still driving your life, you don't have to keep living that way. Okay, that's a script in your mind that you can change. I am gonna start offering. I haven't put up my calendar yet. I'm working on getting my calendar together to offer some soul shift sessions, y'all. That's what I'm calling it. A soul shift session where we can get together, talk through where you are and how you can make those shifts to get you to move from survival to thriving. All right, y'all. Even though fear is what raised me, it is not what will raise my children, and it will not continue to lead my life. I have chosen faith over fear and belief over delusion. And matter of fact, the only delusion I will allow in my mentals, in my heart, in my spirit, in my soul is the delusion of the life only I can dream of. All right, y'all. Empress here, Dr. Barros, Maritza. I'm signing off. All three of us. We out of here. It's been a great pleasure. I appreciate you spending your time watching this playback. If you've come this far, please drop me a black heart so I know that you listened. All right, y'all. I'll see you again next Tuesday. We're going live 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Peace.